Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today we have Ahikam Kaufman joining us. Ahikam is a financial technology leader and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in corporate finance and technology. The co-founder of SafeBooks.ai, where he leads the development of AI-powered solutions for financial data governance. Now, that phrase might sound a little boring, but I guarantee it's not, and you're going to learn a lot about how the world of finance within corporations works today. So welcome to the show, Ahikam.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Now, before we get started, please give our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
So basically, SafeBooks AI helps you to automate financial data operations in enterprise finance today. Most of the work, we'd like to think above 75% of the resources are dedicated to repetitive activities around the data, to be able to check the data, validate and document the data, whether it's part of their close processes, controls processes, and so on and so forth. And SafeBooks helps to automate that. And we automate that by being able to create a unified data set of all your enterprise financial data. And then we automate the governance of the data. So we actually check the data using our unique proprietary technology called the graph database. And once we checked and linked all the data together, we can actually run agents that can automate activities, repetitive activities that today people are doing, which are probably could be data done by a machine. The machine allows you to do things more in real time, in more scale, check 100% of the data, find mistakes faster, and so on and so forth, allowing people to focus on investigation, remediation, and allowing you to scale without adding bodies to the problem.
Well, Ahikam, that was SafeBooks.ai, very cool technology. What about you? What's the elevator pitch version of your story? Where'd you come from? And if you had to pick an event in your life that was an accelerant for your career, what would it be?
So I started as a CFO, actually, of a startup in Santa Clara, which got acquired by a company called Mercury. And then after spending 8 years in Mercury, Mercury was based in Mountain View, we got acquired by Hewlett-Packard. And one of the things I've noticed is like obviously the sheer volume of manual work done in finance, because you need to do so many complex things. And I'd like to think that many accountants are like almost a combination of a data analyst and an accountant. So you both need to get your arms around the data and you need to control it. And then you need to make accounting decisions. Then after that, I became like an entrepreneur. After Mercury got acquired by HP, I became an entrepreneur and we started a company in Palo Alto called Check, which was one of the first iPhone applications back in the Jurassic ages. And we actually built a very vast platform that aggregated all your financial data and allowed you to pay your bills. So we're connected to all the banks and credit cards in the United States and to all the billers. So you can pay your bills in one click from your payment method of choice, whether it's one of your credit cards, which has a free credit, or your bank account. And we got acquired by Intuit, and then I spent a long tenure at Intuit, building various capabilities. And we also, at some point in time, had, because Intuit is really like a world-class organization, we wanted to automate some of the governance around our money movement because we're a payment platform. And that's kind of like how was I first kind of introduced to the problem of like automating data governance as opposed to doing it manually, which is obviously more complex even with a payment platform, because there's a lot of moving parts and many, many transactions on a daily basis. So to me, the pivotal moment in my career, back to your point, was the fact that after I was a CFO and got acquired several times, I figured that, having some domain expertise in the financial area, I don't have to just pursue a CFO career. I can maybe try and pursue an entrepreneurial career. And that happened in 2007 when we started Check.
That's very, very cool. I'm pretty confident in using my memory banks back to that application Check that you're talking about, and how it was the first option that you had to pay your bills online, or at least one of the first. So that is really cool, Ahikam. Let's move on to the basics of the financial and IT regulatory environment that companies have to abide by in the United States. We're going to talk about something fairly arcane, but integral to every business. If you're sitting here listening to this right now and you're working in a publicly traded company, you have to abide by Sarbanes-Oxley. Can you give us a little primer on what Sarbanes-Oxley, or SOX, is?
Okay. So Sarbanes-Oxley, named after two senators, Sarbanes and Oxley, was enacted, I think, about 22 years ago. And the idea behind that was that companies, the idea was that companies have to have regulated system of internal controls. The most common example I'm using is that think about your home or domestic affairs. We all use credit cards, right? But very few of us actually read the statement and check the statement. Internal controls, it's not about how you execute your business, it's how you govern your business and how you govern your data, making sure there are no mistakes, right? Mistakes are, Gartner talks about, they had a paper last year talking about at least 1/3 of accountants make several mistakes every week. So making mistakes is human, but what's expected is not to avoid mistakes at all. What's expected is how do you remediate mistakes or avoid them for the future. And that's why you need a governance system. So after several difficult corporate, I would say, scandals back in the early 2000s, then the Senate or the House enacted Sarbanes-Oxley, which really forced companies, especially public companies, but sometimes not just public companies, to have a framework for governance, which include all kinds of things, right? So it requires companies to have a designed internal control system. It requires companies to have an audit. It requires the board to supervise the internal controls and the governance of the company. It does all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is that according to the law, the CEO and the CFO of every public company have to sign on a quarterly basis that they've kind of designed and implemented such internal control system. And beyond that, there are actually you have several stages where first initially you self-govern that framework, and then the auditors have to frame it. So it's a whole framework for doing that. But the idea around everything is that everything has to be checked. Now, in order to check that every check was signed 2 times, that's easy. But how do you govern the data? And that's where we come in. To govern the data, it's really complex. Companies process today millions of transactions on a monthly basis on multiple systems. And many times the same transaction is being processed by multiple systems just because that's the nature of the beast. For example, when you procure something, so you make a request to procure, and then you have a procurement system, and then you get an invoice, and then you pay it. So it's being captured by your procurement system, by your AP system or whatever that system is at your bank, by your ERP. And the idea is, how do you govern all the data? How do you reconcile all the data? And all of these are manual activities that people do today. And the idea is, how do as part of your governance system, how do you create the method to be able to check the data, govern data, make sure there are no mistakes, make sure that these controls and checks are documented, because as part of Sarbanes-Oxley, it's not enough just to do them. You actually have to evidence them. You have to be able to demonstrate that you've actioned that. And we're talking about hundreds of actions like that on a monthly basis.
Yeah. And specifically for our listeners, the financial debacles, let's call them, that really drove the creation of Sarbanes-Oxley. Think of companies like Enron and Arthur Andersen and those kinds of events that were real scandals that Ahikam is talking about here. Now, Ahikam, there are many employees and positions within companies that deal with data governance, risk management. Can you help us level set on the kinds of people that we're talking about in this business? Because I like to increase our listeners' business acumen. What's happening in the silos, the parts of the business that they don't normally touch? So what is an internal auditor, for example, the controller? What are those functions? What are they doing as it relates to data governance and keeping the business compliant?
Okay. So I'd like to think, public companies, they have to have like an internal audit function. The role of internal audit is actually to identify risks, to map the risks in the business, and be able to come up or bless how you mitigate these risks. So, for example, if a company has let's say a company is a public company has like retail store, right? So they would look into the various processes in the store, for example, and would say, if we're dealing with cash, what are the ways to protect cash from being abused by store employees, right? That would be one area of risk, but there could be many other areas of risk. So the role of the internal audit is to look at the various activities in the company, be able to map risks, which for the most part would be relevant for the Sarbanes-Oxley regulations, and come up with a mitigation plan, which is then handed over to the operational team to be executed on a regular cadence. So that's kind of how you think about that. And internal audit is important because it's like they should know the business inside out intimately. And based on their knowledge of the business, they could be the best viewer or judge of how to prioritize the risks, right? And then what would be a good mitigation plan for these risks. And that's kind of what the internal audit is about.
Yeah. So let's go back to SafeBooks.ai. You introduced the concept at the top of the show. Now that we've talked about the regulatory environment and some of the people in the business that listeners might not be super familiar with, where does SafeBooks.ai come in, and what's the main business challenge that it solves?
Okay. So, being able to govern data in the office of the CFO is complex. CFOs today, they have to deal with a few challenges. The first challenge is the cost of doing business, right? I'd like to think that, in finance, a lot of the work is manual. So the bigger the company grows, they have to hire more people. And it's just very expensive. It's becoming very expensive. The other thing is that there is an increased regulatory scrutiny. So what I'm trying to say by that, I think the world is going to a direction of 100% audit. So if in the past, because of many human and infrastructure constraints, right, the idea was that let me check your process from an auditor perspective, auditor that audits the company. Let me check your process. Let me take a few samples to see that, the process is like strictly according to policy, and I assume the rest is okay. I think the world will be going to 100% audit, which means you have to check everything, both internally and externally. The other challenge is, I'd like to think, is the accountant shortage. I don't know if you covered that in any of your prior episodes, but there's like a severe accountant shortage, almost to an extent of an exodus in the profession. If people would Google accountant shortage, together with Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, they will see a lot of headlines and stories around that. We'll talk about hundreds of thousands of people that are leaving the profession. The other challenge is that, accountants are not data analysts. So when it comes to make accounting decisions, accountants are obviously the perfect ones to do that. But in order to actually make the accountant decisions based on the right data, you need to validate the data. And there's like an inherent gap between the office of the CFO team ability to check the data and govern data and the tools and capabilities they have to do that. So it's almost like you need to be a data engineer to be able to get your arms around the data and correlate it. And only after that, you can become like the accountant to make decisions on that data. So that's like, I'd like to think part of the challenge we're solving. And of course, AI introduced a whole set of capabilities and that have never existed before in order to solve that problem of how do I validate the integrity, accuracy, and completeness of the data? And once I do that, and of course I document it, then I can make the accounting decisions, then I can consolidate my financials and do everything to be able to actually trust my data. And that's where we come in. We actually help to automate that foundational layer of data across all the disparate systems. Because the other challenge is, again, as we said before, in the modern office of the CFO, all the systems were democratized. If 20 years ago, we would think that ERP would be a one-stop shop, it's not anymore, right? So people buy procurement system, they buy spend management system, they buy billing system, they buy CRM, which actually is responsible for many of the order to cash or revenue activities. They buy document management system. And then your data is dispersed across all these systems, and you need to make sure it all correlates, it all reconciles, performing hundreds of activities. And where SafeBooks come in is we integrate to the data, these data sources, and automatically we can scan and check the data and document these activities in order to at least help teams to get their arms around the data and see if the data correlates and reconciles and makes sense, and also execute, automate all the manual activities that people are doing today to check the data.
Yeah. Human beings, as you talked about before, human beings are doing that work today. AI is through SafeBooks is starting to automate a lot of that, but these are jobs that are there's a lot of drudge work. There's a lot of just grind in that sampling process. And all you were doing before was sampling part of the data, crossing your fingers and hoping that the rest of the process, that everything else followed suit. So the bottom line here is this is a great AI tool that's going to allow humans to do higher and better and more interesting work for companies, because there is this key shortage of finance and accounting professionals that we're experiencing today, correct?
Can I add one more phrase?
Sure.
One of my biggest inspirations was the late Steve Jobs. And what he said, our job as people, as a society, is to build tools to empower people. And I'd like to think that, even AI, but specifically in our case, we are building tools to arm finance team with the ability to scan 100% of the data of their work in real time, which is not humanly possible today. So you can only, as you said, you can only look at fraction of the data. You can check a fraction of the data. You spend a lot of time doing that, and you can't do it in real time. So our ability to arm finance teams with tools to be able to automate work across 100% of the data in real time at scale is, I think, what's going to make all of us function better in the enterprise environment, in the regulatory environment.
Yeah, that is really cool stuff. We're going to take a really quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Ahikam Kaufman talking about the Office of the CFO. Hey everyone, I'd like to invite you to start your weekend with me on the Saturday Morning Muse podcast. I briefly explore topics that span leadership, business management, education, and personal continuous improvement. Subscribe to the Saturday Morning Muse podcast on your favorite podcast streaming app or visit andrewtemte.com for more information. And we're back with Ahikam Kaufman talking about the Office of the CFO and how artificial intelligence is making a difference. So, Ahikam, SafeBooks.ai is taking financial data governance to the next level, as we've talked about, measuring all transactions all the time to ensure full data compliance and integrity. What other key challenges is AI going to help solve in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, either now or in the near future? And the thought experiment here is, suppose that you've got the CFO of a mid-sized business who's skeptical about adopting AI. What's your advice to help them get started, and what's coming down the pike?
So I'd like to think that, the CFO, the office of the CFO is slightly behind in terms of technology. We have a lot of systems, and the systems are doing a great job in moving a transaction from phase A to phase B. For example, if you're using a procurement system and you want to create a purchase order, then the procurement system is great in moving a transaction from like an intake situation to a purchase order situation, or a vendor from like pre-onboarded to post-onboarded. But a lot of the activities around data are automated. I'd like to think in the future, we can automate many of the finance operations activities in finance today, including maybe checking accounting decisions on transactions. But the first and foremost, I think the low-hanging fruit is just to take the daily, weekly, monthly, repetitive work around data. Some of it is data governance, some of it is control, some of it is around reconciliation, some of it is just around checking things, and then just automate it, because a machine can do a better job at repetitive, boring work across 100% of the data, no exceptions. As our chief business officer says, AI doesn't take vacations and never goes to sleep, right? Yeah. So, and I think it also helps people focus on things which are important. And, none of us wants to go back to the abacus days, right? We all like the financial calculator or the electronic calculator. It's the same. I think it's going to create more opportunities opposed to less opportunities, but it will just save us the sheer need to do things which don't have a solution today but manual work. So a lot of companies have outsourced it or offshored it or whatever, but the real solution is to automate a lot of these things. And I think that's the real low-hanging fruit opportunity. One of the examples I've used is like, again, the junction between unstructured and structured data. So you have to read a lot of documents and compare them to the data to make sure that your source of truth reconciles with your data in the systems. And this is like the most time-consuming, difficult task to do, because it's easy to do on 2 documents. It's really difficult to do on 10,000 documents, right? So the ability for a machine to do that, it's just a capability that did not exist 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It now exists. So I think it's like just a natural evolvement. So I'd like to think in the office of the CFO, to your point, being able to automate all kind of activities around document management, order management, being able to automate things around data reconciliations, data classifications, things like that, can really allow you to empower your teams, focus on the most important things, be more accurate with the data, meet regulatory requirements, and just move faster, close faster. Think about, companies using SafeBooks today. once, let's say, processes are automated, they can't do month-end close, and the data is fully vetted because they served with the anomalies or with the issues on a daily basis. So, and they remediate them. You don't need to wait at the end of the month to do this whole special thing. So it really changes how you operate.
Yeah, that was going to be where I was going to go next with this is, Ahikam, do you think that month-end close might be less hectic and allow more finance people to keep more of their hair in the future?
I'd like to think that month-end close has like really 3 elements. The first element is you need to clean the data, right? You need to make sure all the data is in the right place, in the right time, classified correctly, all of that, right? Above that, you need to make certain accounting decisions. And above that, you need to document it so you can like publish your earnings and all of that. The first layer should be done in like 0 time. And that's what we're aspiring. Accounting decisions always have to be made, right? You have like rev rec things, special contracts. It's always going to take time. You don't have to do it. It doesn't have to be back and loaded, right? But the data part of the close, the data part of running your business has to be done in real time or near real time, and that's what we're aspiring. And then the second and third layers will take a couple of days, and that's okay.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Ahikam, this has been a lot of fun to talk about the office of the CFO and some of the big changes that are happening today. And SafeBooks is driving and leading the way. A few lightning round questions for you, if you're ready.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Excellent. So you just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or cause. Who do you pick?
I'd like to pick, I don't know if I can name names, but I'd like to pick any organizations that work with children around the world to empower them, to educate them, to help them cope with the challenges and opportunities of this new world we're stepping into.
Yeah, my choice there is the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. That's that I serve on the board there. So
go.
Excellent.
Oh, well, that's a good a good pick.
Excellent choice. Second question, I give you access to a time machine. You can send a message to an earlier version of yourself. What's the message and what previous version do you send it to?
Of myself?
You.
Of you. Yeah, I would go back to my earliest days of my career, and I would just say, try to observe more, learn more, take it a little bit more easy. I think personally, I always feel like you run against the clock, and sometimes you just need to watch and learn and absorb. And that's what I would recommend the younger version of myself.
Yeah, because you can actually move faster if you sit back, take a look around, and then make better decisions, for example.
Totally.
Yeah. So, Ahikam, we're all works in progress from a leadership perspective. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
we're really passionate about solving a complex problem, which is like the data integrity, visibility, and governance in the office of the CFO. What keeps me, I would say, up at night all times is how do you build an organization that learns, that improves on a weekly basis? We try to measure ourselves every week. How do you build that in an organization? So it's not just about yourself. How do you empower others? As Brad Smith used to tell us at Intuit, how do you make people do the best job of their lives in your company, in your organization? That's really what I'm focused on. So it's not just about me. It's just how do you make sure all the people around you, they do the best job of their life, they have the best opportunity, they develop, and so on.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Ahikam, where can folks get a hold of you and learn more about SafeBooks.ai?
LinkedIn is a great place, or Ahikam at SafeBooks.ai, but probably LinkedIn is a great place to reach out and connect.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your colleagues, and your neighbors. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.